The Omaha Civic Auditorium was supposed to hold 18,500 people for Elvis Presley's concert on June 19, 1977. It was part of what would become Elvis's final tour, though nobody knew that yet. What everyone did know was that ticket sales had been disappointing. Very disappointing. By the afternoon of the show, only 9,653 tickets had been sold, leaving the arena less than half full. Elvis was in his dressing room backstage 2 hours before showtime when his tour manager knocked on the door. Colonel Parker had sent him to deliver the news about ticket sales, and he was dreading it. Elvis had been in a fragile state for months, struggling with prescription drug addiction, weight gain, and the creeping awareness that his career was in decline. "Elvis," the manager said carefully, "we need to talk about tonight's show." Elvis looked up from the sandwich he was eating, his face already showing concern. "What's wrong?" "Ticket sales are lower than expected, significantly lower. We're at about 52% capacity." Elvis set down his sandwich, his expression shifting from concern to devastation. "How many empty seats?" "About 8,847, the manager said quietly. Elvis stood up and walked to the mirror, looking at himself. At 42 years old, bloated from medication, exhausted from years of touring and excess, he saw what the public must be seeing. An aging, declining version of the man who'd once been the biggest star in the world. "They don't want me anymore," Elvis said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm washed up. I'm yesterday's news." The manager tried to offer reassurance, stumbling over his words. "Elvis, you're still a huge star. One bad night of sales doesn't mean anything. It's just Omaha. It's June. People are on vacation. It doesn't reflect on you or your—" "Don't lie to me," Elvis interrupted, his voice sharp but pained. "Please don't lie to me. I can see what's happening. I read the reviews. I know what people are saying. I know I'm not what I used to be. I'm fat. I forget lyrics. I can barely make it through shows without collapsing. Sometimes I don't even know what city I'm in. Why would people pay good money to see that? Why would anyone choose to watch me fail?" Elvis sat back down, his head in his hands. For several minutes he was silent. The manager stood awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Then Elvis looked up and something had shifted in his expression. "How much are the unsold tickets worth?" Elvis asked. "What do you mean?" "The 8,847 empty seats. If we sold all of them, how much money would that be?" The manager did quick math in his head. "Depending on the seat prices, probably around $42,000. Elvis nodded slowly, then reached for his wallet. He pulled out a checkbook, something he rarely carried personally anymore. "I'm buying them," he said. "You're buying what?" "All the unsold tickets. All 8,847 of them. I'm buying them right now." The manager stared at Elvis like he'd lost his mind. "Elvis, you can't buy your own unsold tickets. That's not how it works. That's throwing away money." "Is it?" Elvis asked. "Or is it guaranteeing that everyone who wants to see me tonight, but can't afford to, gets that chance?" Elvis wrote a check for $42,000 to cover the remaining tickets, his hand shaking slightly as he signed his name. Then he made some calls, using his personal connections and his fame to mobilize Omaha's community organizations. He contacted local radio stations, homeless shelters, hospitals, nursing homes, veteran centers, and community centers. "I have free tickets to tonight's show," Elvis told each of them, his voice regaining strength with each call. "As many as you need. I want you to give them to people who wouldn't normally be able to afford a concert. I want you to give them to people who need something good in their lives." Word spread quickly through Omaha. Radio DJs interrupted their regular programming to announce that Elvis Presley had bought thousands of tickets to his own show and was giving them away to anyone who wanted them. Hospitals called patients who were well enough to attend, offering them a night out they'd never forget. Homeless shelters organized transportation, helping their residents get to the venue. Community centers reached out to struggling families, single parents working multiple jobs, elderly people on fixed incomes who'd loved Elvis since the 1950s, but had never been able to afford concert tickets. By 6 p.m., 2 hours before showtime, people were lining up outside the Omaha Civic Auditorium, clutching free tickets they had received, many of them still in disbelief that this was really happening. Many were elderly people on fixed incomes who'd loved Elvis since the 1950s, but couldn't afford concert prices that had increased dramatically over the years. Some were families with young children who'd never seen Elvis perform live and never thought they would. Some were homeless individuals who'd been given tickets and nice clothes by shelter staff specifically so they could attend with dignity and respect. Some were hospital patients, still weak from illness, determined not to miss this unexpected opportunity. Elvis watched from a window backstage as the arena filled up, watched as people who'd been given free tickets entered with expressions of pure joy and disbelief, many of them crying before the show even started. Watched as the empty seats disappeared one by one, replaced by an audience that was there not because they'd purchased tickets months ago and were now wondering if they'd made a good investment, but because Elvis had specifically chosen to include them, had seen them as worthy of this gift, had recognized their humanity and their need for something beautiful. "You're crazy," his tour manager said, standing beside him. "You just spent $42,000 to give away tickets. The Colonel is going to lose his mind." "I don't care what the Colonel thinks," Elvis said. "Look at those people. They're here because I wanted them here, because music shouldn't be something only rich people get to experience. Music is supposed to be for everyone." When Elvis walked on stage at 8 p.m. to a full arena, the reception was unlike anything he'd experienced in years. The applause was thunderous, genuine, filled with gratitude and love. These weren't people who'd bought tickets months ago and were now wondering if they'd made a good investment. These were people who'd been given an unexpected gift and were determined to appreciate every second of it. Elvis stood at the microphone, looking out at the crowd. "Good evening, Omaha," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want you all to know something. Most of you tonight are here as my guests. I bought your tickets because I wanted to make sure that anyone who wanted to see this show could see it, regardless of whether they could afford it." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. "Music is a gift," Elvis continued. "It's something God gave us to connect with each other, to feel things, to be transported somewhere beyond our everyday lives. It shouldn't be locked behind expensive ticket prices. It should be shared. So tonight, you're all my guests, and I'm honored you're here." What happened next was remarkable. Elvis, who'd been struggling through performances for months, who'd been forgetting lyrics and seeming disengaged, suddenly came alive. He performed with energy and passion that his road crew hadn't seen in years. He sang every song like it mattered, like he was performing not for an audience, but for friends he'd personally invited. The crowd responded in kind. They weren't the jaded concertgoers who'd seen it all before. They were people experiencing something special, something they'd never expected to experience. They sang along to every song. They cried during the ballads. They cheered after every number. During "Can't Help Falling in Love," Elvis looked out at the audience and saw an elderly woman in the front row, tears streaming down her face, mouthing every word. He saw a father holding his young daughter on his shoulders so she could see better. He saw homeless men in donated suits, sitting in good seats, smiling like they'd been given the world. After the show, which had lasted nearly 2 hours and included 3 encores, Elvis returned to his dressing room exhausted but genuinely happy for the first time in months. His tour manager was waiting with a financial breakdown. "You lost $42,000 tonight," the manager said, showing Elvis the numbers. "After paying for the tickets you bought plus the cost of the show, you're deep in the red." Elvis looked at the numbers, then at his manager. "Did you watch the show?" "Of course I did." "Did you see those people's faces? Did you see how they responded?" "Yes, but then I didn't lose anything," Elvis said. "I gained 8,847 people who will remember tonight for the rest of their lives. I gained the knowledge that music can still matter, that I can still connect with people. I gained proof that success isn't about how many tickets you sell, it's about how many lives you touch." The tour manager shook his head. "The Colonel is going to be furious." "Let him be furious," Elvis said. "I spent my own money. I made my own choice, and it was the best decision I've made in years." News of what Elvis had done spread quickly. Local media covered the story. Then national media picked it up. "Elvis buys thousands of tickets to his own show, gives them to those who can't afford it," ran the headlines. The story resonated with people, reminding them of the generous, compassionate Elvis they'd loved before fame had complicated everything. Colonel Parker was indeed furious when he learned what Elvis had done. "You can't just give away $42,000 worth of tickets," Parker shouted during a phone call the next day. "That's not how business works." "It's my money," Elvis responded calmly, "and it's my career. I'll do what I want with both. Your career won't last long if you keep throwing money away." "Maybe," Elvis said, "but at least I'll go out knowing I did something that mattered." The incident marked a turning point in Elvis's final months. He continued the tour, but with a different attitude. He started paying more attention to who was in his audiences, looking for people who seemed genuinely moved by the music, rather than just there to see a celebrity. He started donating tickets to every show, though never again on the scale of Omaha, making sure that people who couldn't afford concerts had opportunities to attend. The people who received free tickets that night in Omaha never forgot it. Years later, interviews with attendees revealed that many of them considered it one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. Not just seeing Elvis perform, but being chosen, being included, being given something precious they couldn't have afforded on their own. "I was homeless at the time," said Robert Martinez in a 2007 interview. "Living in a shelter, trying to get back on my feet. When they told us Elvis Presley had bought tickets for us to see his show, I thought it was a joke. But it was real." And that night, sitting in that arena, wearing a donated suit, watching Elvis perform, I felt human again. I felt like I mattered. That gift, that gesture, it was part of what motivated me to keep trying, to rebuild my life. I've been successful now for 30 years, and I still have that ticket stub. It reminds me that kindness matters, that generosity matters, that we all deserve dignity and joy. Elvis died less than 2 months after the Omaha concert on August 16, 1977. When the news broke, many of the people who'd received free tickets that night in June felt a personal loss. They'd been given not just a concert ticket, but a final gift from a man who'd recognized they existed, who'd wanted to include them. At Elvis's funeral, several people traveled from Omaha to Memphis to pay their respects, still carrying the ticket stubs from that June night. One woman told a reporter, "He didn't have to do what he did. He could have just performed for a half-empty arena and collected his money. But he chose to fill those seats with people like me, people who loved his music but could never afford to see him. That's not something you forget. That's love." The story of Elvis buying his own unsold tickets became one of the most beloved tales of his final months. It represented the best version of Elvis, the one who existed underneath the fame and the pills and the decline. The Elvis who recognized that true success wasn't measured in ticket sales or money, but in human connection and generosity. Today, when people talk about Elvis's 1977 tour, they often focus on his declining health, his struggles, his obvious deterioration. But those who were in Omaha on June 19, 1977, tell a different story. They talk about a man who turned a potential disaster into a triumph, who chose inclusion over ego, who spent his own money to ensure that people who loved his music could experience it live. The tour manager who'd told Elvis he'd lost $42,000 that night eventually changed his perspective. In a 1985 interview, he said, "At the time, I thought Elvis was being reckless and emotional, but looking back, I realize he was being brilliant. He understood something the rest of us didn't, that the real value of music isn't in how much money it makes, but in how many hearts it touches. Those 8,847 people he gave tickets to, they got something priceless. And so did Elvis. He got to remember why he started performing in the first place, not for the money or the fame, but for the connection, for the joy of sharing something beautiful with people who appreciated it. Elvis's final gift to Omaha was a reminder that generosity isn't about giving what you can spare, but about giving what matters, even when you're struggling, even when the world tells you you're failing. He could have viewed the poor ticket sales as proof of his decline, as evidence that his career was over. Instead, he saw an opportunity to do something meaningful, to fill an arena not with customers, but with guests, not with transactions, but with generosity. The night Elvis bought every unsold ticket to his own show, he proved that success isn't about proving you're still on top. It's about lifting others up, about sharing what you have, about recognizing that the measure of a life isn't in what you accumulate, but in what you give away. And in doing so, he created a memory that outlasted his death, a story that continues to inspire decades later, a final proof that the king of rock and roll understood something essential about what really matters.